The Valdrine Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They had ruled over 17 star systems for more than 3,000 years. Their technology was amazing. They could control gravity, travel faster than light, and build cities that floated in space. Other alien species looked at them with respect and fear. The Valdrine were advanced in every way that mattered. But today, Emperor Kethris stood alone in his private chambers, and he was afraid. The Emperor was tall, even for his species. His body was covered in dark green scales that usually shimmered with health and power, but today those scales looked dull. His golden eyes were filled with worry as he stared at 3 small creatures lying on a soft platform in the center of the room. The baby dragons were tiny. Each one was no bigger than a house cat. Their scales shimmered with colors that changed from purple to gold to silver in the light. They were beautiful. They were precious. They were the future of the royal family, created through ancient breeding programs that took hundreds of years to perfect, and they were dying. Kethris had watched his children grow weaker every day since they hatched 6 rotations ago. In human time, that was about 2 weeks. The hatchlings would not eat. They would not sleep properly. Instead, they made terrible crying sounds that hurt the ears of everyone who heard them. The sounds were so loud and sharp that they actually broke some of the crystal decorations in the palace. Several servants had to leave their jobs because the noise made them sick. The Emperor had called for the best doctors in the Empire. 5 famous xenobiologists came to examine the baby dragons. These were scientists who had studied alien life forms for their entire careers. They ran every test they could think of. They used machines that could see inside the dragons' bodies. They checked the air, the temperature, the light, everything in the environment. Nothing worked. The dragons kept getting worse. The royal physician, a Valdrine named Torvin who had served 3 generations of the imperial family, finally gave up. He resigned from his position in shame. He told the Emperor that he had no idea what was wrong. The technology said the dragons were healthy, but clearly they were not. Kethris felt helpless. He was the ruler of billions of people across multiple worlds, but he could not save his own children. The Emperor walked slowly to where the dragons lay. Each baby was in its own section, separated by clear energy fields. The fields kept them safe and allowed doctors to monitor each dragon individually. It was the most advanced medical setup in the galaxy. One of the dragons, the smallest one, opened her eyes and looked at him. She made a small, sad sound. Then she closed her eyes again. Kethris felt his hearts break. Yes, hearts. The Valdrine had 2. A door opened behind him. Velkrin, his chief advisor, entered the room. Velkrin was older than the Emperor, with silver scales that marked his age. He had been advisor to Kethris's father and grandfather before him. He was wise and careful, and he never spoke unless he had something important to say. Your Majesty, Velkrin said quietly, I have been researching. There is one option we have not tried yet. Kethris turned around. His eyes were desperate. Tell me. I will try anything. Velkrin hesitated. The Emperor could tell that his advisor was uncomfortable with whatever he was about to suggest. The humans, Velkrin finally said. Kethris stared at him. The humans? The new species that just joined the Galactic Council? Yes, Your Majesty. The Emperor felt a flash of anger. Humans were primitives. They had only been traveling in space for about 100 years. That was nothing compared to the Valdrine's 3,000 years. Humans had no special powers. They could not read minds like the Telkari. They were not strong like the Gorvan. They did not have armored skin or natural weapons. They were weak, soft creatures who came from a small planet on the edge of civilized space. But Velkrin continued talking. I know what you are thinking, Your Majesty. But the humans have a reputation. They solve problems in strange ways, ways that no other species thinks of. There is a human medical ship docked at Station Pinnacle right now. They are traveling to the outer colonies to help with a disease outbreak there. Why would humans be able to help when our own doctors cannot? Kethris demanded. I do not know if they can, Velkrin admitted, but they are different from us. Very different. Maybe that is what we need. Someone who thinks differently. Kethris looked back at his children. The middle dragon was crying again, that horrible sound that made his head hurt. In 6 rotations, he had held each of them only once. The doctor said too much handling would stress them. So he watched them suffer from a distance behind energy fields and monitoring equipment. How long until the human ship leaves the station? He asked. They depart in 3 cycles, Your Majesty. 3 cycles. In human time, that was about 1 day. His children might not last much longer than that anyway. The Emperor made his decision. Pride and tradition did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except saving his children. Contact the human ship, he ordered. Tell them the Emperor of the Valdrine Empire requests their help. Offer them whatever they want. Money, technology, territory. Just get them here as fast as possible. Velcrin bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. Right away. As his advisor left to send the message, Kethris sat down on the floor next to the platform where his children lay. This was not proper behavior for an emperor. He was supposed to sit on his throne, high above everyone else, but he did not care about that right now. Hold on, little ones, he whispered to the dragons. Help is coming. Strange help from a strange species, but help nonetheless. The smallest dragon opened her eyes again at the sound of his voice. She tried to move toward him, but the energy field stopped her. She pressed against it, making small crying sounds. Kethris reached out and touched the field. It was warm and tingly against his scales. The dragon on the other side pressed her tiny nose against the field where his hand was. Soon, the Emperor promised. Soon you will be better. He hoped he was right. He hoped the humans could do what the Valdrine could not. Because if they failed, he would lose not just his children, but also his hope. The palace was quiet except for the crying of the baby dragons. Outside, the Valdrine Empire continued as it always had, strong and confident. But inside these chambers, the most powerful being in 17 star systems sat on the floor and waited for help from the galaxy's newest and weakest species. In another part of the galaxy, on a medical ship called the Hope's Journey, a young human woman named Katie Morrison was eating dinner in the crew cafeteria when her communicator beeped. She looked at the screen and her eyes went wide. The message was marked urgent. It was from the station commander. It said that the Valdrine Emperor himself was requesting medical assistance. The situation was classified as a priority emergency. Katie had never even met a Valdrine before. She knew they were one of the big, important species that basically ran the Galactic Council. She also knew they thought humans were not very impressive. So why would they be calling for human help? She finished her dinner quickly and headed to the captain's office. Whatever was happening, it had to be serious. Emperors did not ask for help unless they were desperate. Katie had no idea that she was about to change history, not just for the Valdrine but for dozens of species across the galaxy, all because she knew something simple that ancient advanced civilizations had somehow forgotten. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and sometimes the most powerful technology in the universe could not replace the simple act of holding someone who needed comfort. Katie Morrison had been a nurse for 8 years before she joined the Human Medical Corps and started traveling through space. She had worked in hospitals on Earth, taking care of sick children and babies. She loved her job even when it was hard and sad. There was something special about helping the smallest and most vulnerable patients get better. When humans first started meeting alien species, Katie was fascinated. She took every xenobiology course she could find. She learned about different body types, different blood chemistry, different ways that alien babies grew and developed. It was amazing how different species could be, but also how similar in some ways. Now she was on a shuttle heading down to the Valdrine homeworld, and she was nervous. The shuttle was fancy, much fancier than anything humans usually built. Everything was smooth and shiny. The seats adjusted automatically to her body. When she thought about wanting water, a panel opened and offered her a drink. The Valdrine technology was incredible. But the Valdrine official sitting across from her did not look impressed with Katie. His name was Velcrin. He was about 7 feet tall, covered in silver and green scales that looked like armor. His eyes were golden and sharp, and they studied Katie like she was a bug under a microscope. He had not said much since they left the station. His body language made it clear that he did not think a human could solve a problem that Valdrine scientists could not. Katie understood his doubt. She was young, only 29 years old. She was short compared to most aliens, just 5 feet 4 inches. She had brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing her standard medical corps uniform, which was just blue scrubs with some patches on them. She probably did not look very impressive. Tell me about the patients, Katie said, breaking the silence. What symptoms are they showing? Velcrin seemed surprised that she asked a direct question. Maybe he expected her to be scared or intimidated. The hatchlings will not eat, he said. His voice came through a translator device, so it sounded flat and emotionless. They will not sleep normally. They cry constantly. The sounds they make are damaging to our equipment and painful to our staff. We have tried 17 different nutritional formulas. We have adjusted the temperature, the light levels, the air composition. We have scanned them with every medical device in our arsenal. According to all of our readings, they should be healthy. But they are clearly suffering. How old are they? Katie asked. They hatched 6 rotations ago. Katie did some quick math in her head. A Valdrine rotation was about 40 hours, so the dragons were roughly 2 weeks old in Earth time. Have they been together since they hatched? She asked. Velcrin looked confused by the question. They are in the same medical facility, yes, but they are properly separated for individual monitoring and care. Something clicked in Katie's mind, but she did not say anything yet. She needed to see the babies first. The shuttle landed on a platform high up in the Imperial Palace. The building was enormous, made of materials that seemed to glow with their own light. Guards stood everywhere, their bodies crackling with some kind of energy that Katie guessed was dangerous. She followed Velcrin through hallways that were too big and too beautiful to describe properly. Everything was art. The walls, the ceilings, even the floors had patterns that moved and changed as they walked. Katie tried not to stare like a tourist, but it was hard. Finally, they reached a large door that opened silently. Inside was a room full of medical equipment, most of which Katie did not recognize. And in the center of the room was a raised platform with 3 separate sections, each surrounded by a shimmering energy field. In each section lay a tiny dragon. Katie forgot about the Emperor standing at the back of the room. She forgot about Velcrin and the guards. She forgot about being nervous. Her nurse training took over, and she moved toward the platform with focused attention. The dragons were beautiful. Their scales shimmered with colors that seemed impossible, shifting between purple and gold and hints of silver. They had small wings folded against their bodies. Their faces were almost cat-like, with large eyes and small horns just starting to grow from their heads. But Katie's trained eye saw past the beauty. She saw babies in distress. Their breathing was too fast and too shallow. Their body position was all wrong, curled up tight in a defensive posture. Their scales looked dull in places, which probably meant they were dehydrated. One of them was making a small, sad crying sound that hurt Katie's heart to hear. "Can I go inside the containment field?" Katie asked. There was a pause. Then Velcrin said, "It may be dangerous. They are distressed and could—" "I need to examine them properly," Katie interrupted. She turned to look at the Emperor for the first time. He was tall and intimidating, with scales darker than Velcrin's and eyes that glowed with power. But right now, those eyes just looked sad and desperate. "Please," Katie said simply. "I need to touch them to understand what's wrong." Emperor Kethris studied her for a long moment. Then he made a gesture with his hand, and the energy fields disappeared with a soft sound. Katie moved slowly and carefully. She had learned a long time ago that scared babies of any species needed calm, gentle movement. She knelt down next to the nearest dragon and started humming softly. It was not a real song, just a gentle tune that she had always used with human babies. Something about the rhythm and tone seemed to cross species barriers. The dragon's eyes opened. They were beautiful, swirling with different colors. The baby looked at Katie with confusion and fear. "Hey there, little one," Katie whispered. She reached out slowly and gently touched the dragon's head. The scales were warm, maybe too warm. Fever, probably. The dragon did not pull away. Instead, it leaned slightly into her touch. Katie ran her hands carefully over the small body, checking for injuries or deformities. She looked at the wings, the legs, the tail. Everything seemed physically normal. She checked the dragon's mouth and saw tiny crystal-like teeth just coming in. That might be painful, like teething in human babies. But as she examined this dragon and then moved to the other 2, she noticed something important, something that all the advanced technology in the room had missed. The 3 dragons were separated. Each one was alone in its own space. Each one was isolated. Katie sat back and looked at the setup. She looked at all the fancy equipment, the monitors showing data she could not read, the perfect temperature control, the sterile environment, and she understood. "When did they hatch?" she asked. 6 rotations ago," the Emperor answered. "And you've been keeping them apart this whole time?" "For safety and proper monitoring," Velcrin said. "Each hatchling needs individual attention and—" Katie was not listening anymore. She was already moving. She carefully picked up the first dragon, feeling it tremble in her hands. It was so light, too light. These babies were not eating enough. Then she picked up the second dragon, then the third. The dragons started making louder sounds, but not the painful crying from before. These were different sounds, almost like chirping. Katie sat down cross-legged on the floor, right there in front of the Emperor and all his officials. She arranged the 3 dragons in her lap, pressed together so their bodies were touching. Then she wrapped her arms gently around all of them, creating a warm bundle. The change happened so fast that everyone in the room gasped. The dragons immediately snuggled against each other. They pressed their small bodies together, their tails wrapping around each other. The crying sound stopped. Their breathing started to slow down and deepen. The tension in their small bodies began to release. Katie kept humming softly, rocking just a little bit, holding them close. "They're babies," she said quietly, looking up at the assembled Valdrine officials with their advanced degrees and thousands of years of civilization. "They're scared. They're cold. They're lonely. They don't need more technology. They need each other. They need warmth. They need someone to hold them." The room was silent. Katie could see the shock on the aliens' faces. Well, she thought it was shock. She was still learning to read Valdrine expressions. Emperor Kethris moved closer, staring at his children. For the first time since they hatched, they looked peaceful. Their scales were already starting to brighten. The smallest one yawned, showing those tiny crystal teeth, and then nuzzled deeper into Katie's arm. "This is impossible," Velkrin whispered. "Our medical protocols are designed by the finest minds in the Empire. We have optimized every aspect of hatchling care over thousands of years." Katie looked at him. She was not trying to be rude, but she needed him to understand. "You optimized them right into isolation," she said gently. "Look, I don't know everything about dragon biology, but I know about babies. I've studied xenobiology files on dozens of species. Almost every intelligent species has babies that need contact, warmth, connection. It's not just about food and the right temperature. It's about feeling safe." She adjusted her arms, making sure all 3 dragons were comfortable. "On Earth, we learned this the hard way. About 100 years ago, we had orphanages where babies got food and clean clothes and medical care. But nobody held them much, and those babies got sick. Some of them died, even though nothing was physically wrong with them. We called it failure to thrive." Katie looked down at the dragons in her arms. "We figured out that human..." The next morning, Katie woke up on a couch in the Imperial nursery. Her back hurt from sleeping in an awkward position, and her arm was numb because a baby dragon had been sleeping on it for the past few hours. She had never been happier in her entire career. The 3 dragons were doing so much better. They had eaten 3 times during the night. They were sleeping peacefully, curled together in a nest Katie had made from soft blankets she brought from her medical kit. Their scales were brighter, their breathing was normal, and they had not made a single distress cry in over 8 hours. The Valdrine medical staff, however, looked horrified. "This is completely improper," said one of the doctors, a female Valdrine named Seta. She had arrived early in the morning to check on the hatchlings and found Katie sleeping with them. "The hatchlings should be in their proper containment fields with full monitoring." Katie sat up carefully, trying not to wake the babies. "They're fine. Better than fine. Look at them." Seta did look. She checked the portable monitor that Katie had convinced them to use instead of the big fancy machines. The readings were all good. Actually, they were better than they had been since the dragons hatched. "The data is acceptable," Seta admitted slowly, "but the methodology is bizarre. You slept here. You held them all night. This is not proper medical procedure." "No," Katie agreed. "It's parenting." The word did not translate well into Valdrine. Seta's translator made a confused sound. Katie tried again. "Look, I know your species has advanced childcare protocols, but sometimes babies just need someone to be there, not monitoring them from across the room, but actually there, holding them when they cry, feeding them when they're hungry, just being present. We have optimized child development over 3,000 years, Seta said. She sounded defensive. Katie stood up and stretched. Everything hurt. She was going to need coffee, or whatever the Valdrine equivalent was. "Can I ask you something? How many Valdrine are happy?" Seta blinked, which for a Valdrine meant their inner eyelid flashed quickly. "I do not understand the question." "Happy, content, emotionally fulfilled. How many Valdrine feel close to their families?" How many have strong friendships? The doctor did not answer right away. Katie could see her thinking about it. Valdrine society is efficient, Seta finally said. We have low crime rates, high productivity. Our citizens are successful and accomplished. That's not what I asked, Katie said gently. Before Seta could respond, Emperor Kethris entered the nursery. He looked like he had not slept much either. He came straight to where his children were sleeping and knelt down to watch them. They are peaceful, he said softly. They ate well during the night, Katie reported. No crying. They're bonding with each other, which is good. Their temperature regulation is improving. I think they're going to be okay. The Emperor reached out and very gently touched the smallest dragon's head. She stirred in her sleep but did not wake. A small sound came from her throat, content and safe. I want to understand this, Kethris said. Explain to me why our advanced methods failed where your simple approach succeeded. Katie thought about how to explain it. Your technology can monitor everything about their bodies. You can see their heart rate, their brain activity, their nutrition levels. But technology can't measure loneliness. It can't measure fear. It can't tell you that a baby just needs to be held. She sat down next to the Emperor. Humans figured this out because we made the same mistakes you did. We thought science meant being detached and objective. We thought too much handling would make babies weak or sick. But we were wrong. Babies need contact. It's not optional. It's as important as food. We have child-rearing pods, Seta said. They maintain perfect temperature, provide nutrition, monitor all biological functions. Contact with adults is scheduled at optimal developmental intervals. Katie tried not to laugh, but a small sound escaped anyway. You schedule cuddle time? We have optimized every aspect of childhood development. And how did that work out? Katie asked, gesturing to the 3 dragons who had almost died under optimal care. There was a long silence. Things will need to change, Emperor Kethris said quietly. Not just for my children, for all Valdrine children. Velkrin told me last night that 17 other families have already asked about your methods. Word is spreading through the palace. Over the next week, Katie basically moved into the Imperial Nursery. The Valdrine staff gave her a proper room nearby, but she spent most of her time with the dragons. She fed them, played with them, cleaned up after them, and held them constantly. And she taught. The Emperor wanted to learn first. Every day he came to the nursery and Katie showed him how to hold his children, how to feed them, how to play with them. It was awkward at first. The Valdrine were not used to casual physical contact. But Kethris was determined to be a good father, not just a successful emperor. Support their back like this, Katie demonstrated, holding the middle dragon. They like to feel secure. And talk to them. It doesn't matter what you say. They just need to hear your voice. Kethris held his daughter carefully like she might break. What should I say? Anything. Tell her about your day. Sing her a song. My mom used to recite grocery lists to me when I was a baby. I turned out okay. Singing is inefficient use of vocal communication, the Emperor said. But then he looked down at his daughter and very softly began to hum. It was a deep, resonant sound. The baby dragon's scales shimmered in response. She made a happy chirping sound. She likes it, Katie said with a smile. The Emperor's expression changed. Katie was getting better at reading Valdrine faces, and this looked like joy mixed with sadness. We have forgotten so much, he said quietly. More staff members started coming to learn. Velkrin was interested but skeptical. Seta was defensive but curious. And then there was Shera, a young Valdrine who worked in the palace gardens. Shera was different from the other Valdrine Katie had met. She was younger, maybe equivalent to early 20s in human years. She watched everything Katie did with intense focus, and she asked questions constantly. My grandmother raised me, Shera explained one day while helping Katie feed the dragons. She was very old, from before the optimization protocols became mandatory. She used to hold me and tell me stories. She sang to me. The other Valdrine said she was old-fashioned, but I was happy with her. Did she teach you to sing? Katie asked. Yes, but I do not sing anymore. It is considered wasteful. Katie looked at the young Valdrine. Would you try something for me? Shera nodded. Sing to them, Katie said, gesturing to the dragons. I do not think... Just try. Trust me. Shera hesitated, then began to sing. Her voice was nothing like a human voice. It had harmonics and vibrations that Katie could feel in her chest. The melody was strange and beautiful. The baby dragons went completely still. Their scales began to shimmer and change colors in patterns that matched the rhythm of Shara's song. They swayed slightly, moving to the music. "Oh my," Shara whispered, stopping. "Don't stop," Katie said. "Look at them. They love it." Shara continued singing, and the dragons made happy sounds. They climbed over each other, trying to get closer to her. The smallest one reached out with her tiny claws and patted Shara's hand in time with the music. When Shara finished, there were tears on her scaled cheeks. "We used to do this," she said. "Before optimization. Valdrine used to sing to their children. My grandmother told me stories about it. We stopped because we thought it was primitive." "Sometimes primitive is good," Katie said. "Evolution spent millions of years figuring out what babies need. You can't replace that with a protocol." Word spread quickly through the palace. Other young Valdrine started coming to watch. They saw the Emperor sitting on the floor, holding his children and humming to them. They saw Katie teaching proper holding techniques and feeding methods that did not require expensive equipment. They saw Shara singing while the dragons danced and chirped with joy, and slowly, carefully, things began to change. The sterile medical nursery was transformed. Katie brought in soft fabrics from the palace storage rooms. She convinced them to remove most of the monitoring equipment, keeping only basic safety sensors. She created different areas for sleeping, playing, and feeding. It looked less like a hospital and more like an actual nursery. "This is chaos," Seta complained, watching the dragons climb over a pile of soft cushions while Katie supervised. "This is childhood," Katie corrected. "They need to explore. They need variety. They need to play. Play is not necessary for development." "Yes, it is. Play teaches them about the world. It helps their brains develop. It makes them happy." "Why is happiness not part of your development protocols?" Seta did not have an answer for that. The biggest change came when Katie introduced the concept of the dragon pile. She had noticed that whenever the three siblings were together, they naturally climbed on top of each other, creating a warm, secure heap of baby dragons. They slept better this way. They were calmer. They seemed to need each other's physical presence. "This is how they should be all the time," Katie explained to the assembled staff. "Together, touching, connected, not separated into individual containment fields." "But how will we monitor them individually?" One doctor asked. "Do you really need to? They're healthy. They're happy. Maybe sometimes that's enough." 3 weeks after Katie arrived on the Valdrine homeworld, the Imperial Nursery looked completely different from the sterile medical facility it had been. The cold metal and glass surfaces were now covered with soft fabrics and bright colors. Toys were scattered across the floor, simple things that Katie had helped design based on what the dragons seemed to enjoy. There were climbing structures made of smooth wood, baskets full of things with different textures, and mirrors mounted at dragon height so they could see themselves. The 3 baby dragons were now the size of medium dogs. Growing fast on a diet of proper nutrition and plenty of affection, they played together constantly, wrestling and chasing each other around the room. Their personalities had developed distinctly. The largest, named Kiresh, was brave and adventurous, always the first to try something new. The middle child, named Vela, was thoughtful and gentle, preferring to watch before joining in. The smallest, named Pyrrha, was absolutely fearless and had quickly become everyone's favorite troublemaker. But the real transformation was not in the room or the dragons. It was in the Valdrine themselves. Katie stood at the front of a classroom in the palace education wing. 20 Valdrine adults sat in chairs that were too big for Katie but perfect for them. These were the hand-picked staff who would be responsible for caring for the Emperor's children as they grew. They came from different backgrounds. Some were medical professionals like Seta. Others were teachers, guards, or palace servants. All of them had volunteered to learn the new methods. "Good morning, everyone," Katie said, trying not to feel nervous about teaching a room full of ancient aliens. "Today we are going to talk about emotional development and why physical contact is important." A Valdrine in the back raised his hand. His name was Torvin, one of the former medical staff who had resigned in shame when he could not help the dragons. He had asked to come back and learn the new ways. "I have been reading the materials you provided about human child development. I have a question about the concept of attachment theory." Katie smiled. "Go ahead." The theory suggests that infants form emotional bonds with caregivers through repeated interaction and physical contact. These early bonds affect their entire life development.
Is this correct?
Yes, exactly. Then our Valdrine system was fundamentally wrong from the beginning, Torvin said quietly. We minimized contact. We rotated caregivers to prevent attachment. We thought independence was the goal. We were creating children who could not form proper emotional connections. The room was silent. Katie could feel the weight of what Torvin was realizing. An entire civilization had been raising children in a way that damaged their emotional development. And they had thought they were doing the right thing. You were doing what you thought was best, Katie said gently. Every species goes through this. Humans did too. We had orphanages where babies were fed and kept clean but rarely held. Those babies had serious problems even though they were physically healthy. It took us a long time to understand that emotional needs are just as important as physical needs. How do we fix this? Asked Shara, who was sitting in the front row taking careful notes. Not just for the Emperor's children, but for all Valdrine children. Katie pulled up a display screen showing a simple chart. We start with education. We teach parents and caregivers about contact comfort, about emotional bonding, about reading children's signals. We change the child rearing protocols from scheduled minimal contact to responsive abundant contact. But our pods are already installed in millions of homes, another Valdrine said. The automated child rearing systems are standard across the Empire. Then we modify them, Katie said. Or better yet, we teach parents that they do not need the pods. Technology should support parenting, not replace it. Seta, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. This will be difficult. Valdrine society is built around efficiency and optimization. Parents work long hours. The pods allow them to maintain their productivity while their children are cared for. I know, Katie said. Change is always hard. But look at the results. The Emperor's children are healthier and happier than any Valdrine hatchlings on record. Doesn't that suggest that maybe productivity is not the most important thing? The class ended with more questions than answers. But Katie could see that the Valdrine were really thinking about these ideas. Change was coming, slowly but surely. Later that afternoon, Katie was in the nursery with the dragons when she had an unexpected visitor. A female Valdrine she had never met before entered nervously, accompanied by Velcrin. This is Nethera, Velcrin explained. She is a member of one of the noble families. She has a hatchling who is having difficulties similar to what the Emperor's children experienced. Nethera bowed deeply to Katie, which felt strange. Please, the Valdrine mother said. My son Tilrak hatched 4 rotations ago. He will not eat properly. He cries constantly. The doctors say nothing is wrong, but I know he is suffering. I heard what you did for the Emperor's children. Can you help mine? Katie looked at Velcrin, who nodded. The Emperor has given permission for you to consult on other cases if you are willing. Of course I'm willing, Katie said. Where is your son now? In our family quarters, in his development pod. Okay, Katie said. First thing we are going to do is get him out of the pod. 2 hours later, Katie sat in Nethera's beautifully decorated quarters, holding a baby dragon who was slightly smaller than the Emperor's children. Tilrak had been crying when she arrived. That same heartbreaking sound she had heard from Koresh, Vela, and Pyrrha. But now, bundled against Katie's chest with his mother sitting close beside them, he was quiet. I do not understand, Nethera said, her voice filled with emotion. I have done everything the protocol said. The best pod, the perfect nutrition schedule, the optimal environment. Why was he suffering? Because he needed you, Katie said simply. Not the pod, you. He needed to feel your warmth, smell your scent, hear your heartbeat. Baby dragons are social creatures. They are not meant to be alone in a pod, no matter how perfect the pod is. Katie showed Nethera how to hold her son properly, how to support his weight and keep him secure. She explained about skin-to-scale contact, about the importance of responding to his cries instead of following a schedule. She talked about the dragon pile concept and how hatchlings need to feel connected. But I have work, Nethera said. I manage 3 planetary mining operations. I cannot hold him all day. You do not need to hold him all day, Katie explained. But you need to hold him regularly, multiple times a day, and when you are not available, you need a caregiver who will hold him. Not a pod, a person. Someone who will respond to his needs. This is so different from how I was raised, Nethera said, looking down at her son. He had fallen asleep against her chest, his tiny body finally relaxed. How were you raised? Katie asked, in a pod, with scheduled contact. I saw my parents once per day for 1 hour. I was raised to be independent and self-sufficient. Were you happy? Nethera was quiet for a long time. I was successful, she finally said. I was accomplished. I achieved everything I was supposed to achieve. She paused. But no, I was not happy. I've never felt close to anyone. I thought there was something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, Katie said softly. You were raised in a way that did not teach you how to connect with others. But you can learn now, and you can give your son something better. Tears ran down Nethera's scaled cheeks. I want him to be happy, she whispered. Not just successful, happy. Then hold him, Katie said. Talk to him. Sing to him if you know any songs. And when he cries, go to him. Do not let him cry alone in a pod. Show him that he is not alone. Word spread even faster after that. More families came asking for help. Katie found herself consulting on case after case, always with the same basic advice. Get rid of the pods or at least reduce dependency on them. Hold your children. Respond to their needs. Be present. The Valdrine Medical Council was not happy. They issued statements saying the new methods were not properly tested. They warned about the dangers of abandoning proven protocols. Some older Valdrine were shocked and angry at the changes, but the results spoke for themselves. Every hatchling who received the new care thrived. They were healthier, calmer, and more socially developed than pod-raised children. Emperor Kethris made a decision that shocked the Empire. He issued a new imperial decree. All Valdrine families would receive education about contact, comfort, and emotional bonding. The child-rearing pods would be redesigned to encourage parent interaction rather than replace it. New parental leave policies would allow parents to spend more time with young hatchlings. It was revolutionary. It was controversial, but it was happening. Katie continued training caregivers while also spending time with Kiresh. Vela and Pyrrha, the three royal dragons, were growing fast, and their personalities were becoming even more distinct. Kiresh was showing leadership qualities, organizing games for the others. Vela was incredibly smart, figuring out puzzles that Katie made for her. Pyrrha was the social one, always wanting attention from everyone she met. One day, Shara came to Katie with an excited expression. I have been practicing, she said. I want to show you something. She began to sing, but this was different from before. The song had structure with verses and a chorus. It was beautiful. 4 months had passed since Katie first arrived at the Imperial Palace. The 3 baby dragons were no longer babies. They were now the size of large wolves, sleek and strong, with scales that shimmered like jewels in the light. They could fly short distances, their wings having developed rapidly under the care that emphasized movement and play rather than containment. But more importantly, they were happy. Anyone could see it in the way they moved, the way they interacted with others, the way they explored their world with confidence and joy. Katie stood in the Imperial Gardens watching Kiresh, Vela, and Pyrrha play with a group of young Valdrine children. This would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. Dragons were considered too precious and important to interact casually with commoners, but Emperor Kethris had changed that policy along with so many others. They are teaching the children how to be children, Shara said, standing beside Katie. Shara had been promoted to head caregiver for the royal dragons, a position that was now one of the most respected in the palace. Katie smiled, watching Pyrrha chase after a Valdrine child, who was laughing so hard he could barely run. Children are pretty good at that. You just have to let them. The Medical Council released their official study yesterday, Shara said. They analyzed data from 5,000 hatchlings across the Empire. The ones being raised with the new methods show a 40% improvement in physical health markers and an 80% improvement in social development scores. That's amazing, Katie said. They are calling it the Morrison method, Shara added. Katie laughed. Please do not call it that. It is not my method. It is just basic childcare. It is what parents have been doing naturally for millions of years before anyone invented protocols. Perhaps. But you are the one who reminded us. A servant approached and bowed to both of them. The Emperor requests your presence in the throne room. The Galactic Council representatives have arrived. Katie's heart beat faster. This was the meeting she had been both anticipating and dreading. The Human Medical Corps had been requesting her return for weeks now. There were other missions, other patients who needed help. She could not stay on the Valdrine homeworld forever. But leaving was going to be hard. The throne room was as impressive as always, with its soaring ceilings and walls that seemed to be made of captured starlight. But today it was filled with aliens from dozens of different species. Katie recognized a few from her xenobiology studies. There were Telkari with their crystalline bodies, Gorvan who looked like living rocks, Sealoth whose forms constantly shifted between states of matter, and many others she could not name. Emperor Kethris sat on his throne, but the 3 dragons were with him. Koresh sat regally beside his father's throne. Vela was curled at his feet. Pyrrha was sprawled across the Emperor's lap like an oversized cat, completely comfortable and utterly undignified. Katie had to suppress a smile. The mighty Emperor had been reduced to furniture by his youngest daughter, and he did not seem to mind at all. "Katie Morrison," Kethris said formally. "Approach." Katie walked forward, very aware that every alien eye in the room was watching her. She was still just a human in medical scrubs, small and ordinary compared to the impressive beings around her. "You came to our empire when we were desperate," the Emperor said. "We had exhausted every option. Our most advanced medical science had failed. We believed our children were dying and we could not save them." He paused, stroking Pyrrha's head. She made a contented rumbling sound. "You saved them with knowledge so simple that we had overlooked it completely. You taught us that love is not a luxury or an inefficiency. You showed us that the most important thing we can give our children is our presence." Kethris stood, carefully moving Pyrrha to his shoulder where she climbed and settled like a scaled parrot. "But you did more than save 3 dragons. You changed our civilization. Because of you, millions of Valdrine children will grow up knowing the warmth of their parents' embrace. They will hear songs and lullabies. They will play instead of being optimized. They will be allowed to be children." The Emperor gestured to the assembled representatives. "And now other species want to learn from you. The Galactic Council has received requests from 14 different civilizations asking for human childcare consultants. It seems we are not the only species who forgot how to nurture our young." A Telkari representative stepped forward. Her body chimed like crystal bells when she moved. "My people raise our young in harmonic resonance chambers. The chambers provide perfect acoustic stimulation for crystalline development. But our younglings show signs of emotional distress similar to what you described in Valdrine hatchlings. We have tried to solve this with more sophisticated chamber designs, but nothing works." Katie thought about it. "Do Telkari adults spend time with younglings in the chambers?" "No. The resonance frequency required for growth is uncomfortable for adults. We visit briefly, but mostly the younglings are alone with the machines." "Then that's probably your problem," Katie said. "I do not know much about Telkari biology, but I'm guessing your children need you more than they need perfect resonance. Maybe the chambers should be adjusted so adults can stay with younglings, even if the resonance is not quite perfect." The Telkari representative chimed thoughtfully. "This is worth investigating." A Gorvan representative spoke next, his voice like grinding stone. "My species has a different issue. We are long-lived and slow to reproduce. Our young spend their first century in deep underground chambers, absorbing minerals. They are alone, because we believed solitude would help them focus on growth. But when they emerge, they struggle to integrate into Gorvan society. They do not understand social bonds." "A century alone would do that," Katie said. "Even if they are just absorbing minerals, they are still aware. They are still developing. They need interaction, even if it is different from other species. Maybe some Gorvan adults need to spend time in the chambers with them, read to them, talk to them. Just be present." The Gorvan was silent for a long moment. "This is a radical suggestion, but our methods are clearly not working. We will attempt your approach." One by one, representatives from different species described their childcare practices, and one by one, Katie saw the same pattern. Advanced technology, sophisticated protocols, optimization and efficiency, and isolated, unhappy children. "It is the same mistake every time," Katie said to the assembled council. "You all got so advanced that you forgot the basics. You built perfect environments and forgot that children need imperfect, messy emotional connection more than they need perfection." "But why is this?" asked a Siloth representative. "Why do we all make the same error?" Katie thought about how to explain it. "I think it happens because when you get really advanced, you start believing that everything can be solved with technology. You want to give your children every advantage, so you design systems to optimize their development. But children are not machines to be optimized. They are living beings who need love and connection, and humans never forgot this. The Telkari asked. "Oh, we forgot," Katie said. "We went through our own phase of trying to be too scientific about childcare. We had facilities where babies were kept clean and fed but rarely held. We thought it would make them independent. Instead, it made them sick. We learned the hard way that babies need touch. They need warmth. They need someone to respond when they cry. How did humans remember what other species forgot?" Emperor Kethris asked. Katie smiled. "We did not remember. We just did not have enough time to forget completely. Humans have only been technologically advanced for a couple hundred years. We still have a lot of people alive who remember the old ways. My grandmother told me stories about how she raised her children. No fancy equipment, just love and attention and a lot of sleepless nights. We are still close enough to our primitive roots to remember what matters." "Then this is humanity's gift to the galaxy," Kethris said. "Not advanced technology or military might. Your gift is remembering the simple truths that ancient civilizations lose." The Galactic Council formally requested that Earth establish a cultural exchange program focused on childcare and family bonding. Human nurses and childcare workers would be sent to worlds across the galaxy to teach and consult. In return, human families would learn from alien species about their approaches to education, social development, and other aspects of raising children. It was the first time humans had something to teach the older, more advanced species, and it felt good. But Katie's time on the Valdrine homeworld was ending. Her ship was scheduled to leave in 2 days. She had already extended her stay 3 times, but she could not delay any longer. There were other missions waiting, other patients who needed help. On her last evening, Emperor Kethris held a small ceremony in the gardens. Not a big formal event, just the people who had been part of the transformation. Velkrin, Shara, Seta, Torvin, and a few others who had learned the new methods and would carry them forward. And of course, the 3 dragons, Kiresh, Vela, and Pyrrha, rushed to Katie as soon as she entered the garden. They were big now, but they still acted like the babies she had first held months ago. They climbed over her, chirping and rumbling and trying to show off all the new things they had learned. "I'm going to miss you guys so much," Katie said, hugging all 3 of them. Her eyes were